Hi, my name is Thomas Maurer. I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft. And I often get asked by people, Thomas, do you have any tips and tricks? How do you prepare for the Microsoft Azure certification exams? And how can you help me achieve my certification goals? And so this is what this video is all about. So stay tuned. So again, as I said, a lot of people are asking me currently, how can they actually prepare for a Microsoft certification and how can they actually pass the different exams? Now, again, there might be many reasons why, especially the new Microsoft Cloud or the Microsoft Azure certifications are very valuable to a lot of people. Some just want to advance their career. They want to get a promotion, find a different job, switch teams, or just like people who come in which do not work in IT, which obviously want to find a job in IT. So certifications can definitely help them. These are kind of like the obvious reasons why you would get a certifications, but there are also many others. And I think especially with cloud and what we see in the technology, things are switching a little bit. Like from having all these IT silos where everyone is just focused on one specific service or scenario. For example, like in other companies, you had networking team, storage team, a virtualization team, a specific exchange team. What we see in the cloud world is that you kind of need to be a little bit broader and still deep in some of the topics, right? So you need to understand how things actually play together. You cannot just say, well, this is networking. I don't need to understand anything about networking. I'm just doing this. You still need to have this base knowledge. I'm not saying you need to become a expert on everything, but you need to have a broad understanding usually. And there's a name for it. It's called the T-shaped learner, where you have a fairly broad understanding of the technology or whatever the thing you're working with, but then you're also deep in some of the topics. And so this is what I recommend to people, especially if they're looking at what do I need to learn, right? So with these certification exams, I personally look at, okay, well, these are the things which are important. So these are the things I actually need to learn about. And again, there might be many, many more reasons why you would do that. Now, since I get asked a lot, I wrote a blog post about how I prepare for Microsoft certification exams, especially the ones on Microsoft Azure. Now, let me quickly show you through this. So here on the website, you can see here, this is the blog post. I already wrote it a couple of years ago, if you will, but it's still very accurate when it comes to that. And one of the first thing, obviously, I recommend to everyone when you think about starting getting certified is pick the right certification exam or the right learning path for you. Now, this can mean different things. So if you're probably not familiar with the latest changes we had in certification, is that we now moving basically from technology certifications more to role-based certifications. So for example, we have certifications for Azure administrators, for Azure developers, for Azure solution architects, data scientists, really depending on the job role you're working in or you want to work in the future. And we kind of not nail that down to one specific product or feature, but basically bring that together, all the things you need to know. And so I also recommend that you have a look at these different certifications. So what I can do here is I can switch to the certification website, and you can see here that again, we have here the role-based certifications really on top, really prominent. So you can go through this. But if you scroll down, you can also see here that we have fundamental certifications. So if you're really new to these technologies, and also for example, if you never took a certification exam, I always highly recommend that you start with one of the fundamentals, because this not just gives you an overview about the technology we're talking about, for example, the Azure fundamentals. You need to have a broad understanding of cloud computing in general, but then also Azure. But it also gives you kind of like the sense of how the questions are working, how the exam setup is working. And so I always highly recommend that you start actually with the fundamentals. And then from there on, you would then pick the different role-based certifications. Again, we have things for Azure developers, for Azure architects, and many more, as you can see. And it's not just related to Azure, right? We have that for many other different parts of Microsoft, like Microsoft 365, Dynamics 365, and so on. In addition to these exams, we also have the so-called like specialty exams. So for example, if you're working with SAP on Azure, this might be not a job role for everyone, but you're actually working a lot with SAP on Azure, so you can also get certified for that specific scenario. The same thing, for example, if you're an Azure Stack Hub operator, you can look at that as well. And then there are many more in these certifications. So I always highly recommend that you obviously pick the right one, the one which works best for you. So the next thing I would, again, goes in the same direction. Start small. So this is where I said, okay, go with the fundamentals first and then advance depending on where you want to go. Of course, you can also directly learn from one exam, but it's always good to have the foundation right. The next big step is actually, and I think this is the most important one for basically every exam you're taking, you need to understand what is asked and measured in this exam, right? Being a Microsoft Azure administrator, for example, can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So if you look at the exam page itself, and I will quickly move back to the exam page here, let's open up the Azure Administrator here, for example. So if you can see here how you can actually get that certification, and you can see that there is an exam for that. And if you scroll down here on that, you find the skills measured. And so if I go to the exam itself, you can find more details about which skills are actually measured. So let me zoom in here a little bit for you. So you can see here that like identity and governance is a big part, managing storage, managing Azure Compute, virtual networking, and monitoring and backup Azure resources. Now this is great. So I need to understand all of that in a sense to actually gain that certifications. Obviously, I can make mistakes. That is absolutely fine. You need not to have 100% everything correct. But these are the things which people are asked. So if I want to have a little bit deeper knowledge and understanding what is going to be asked, what does it actually mean? Because if we talk about Azure identity and Azure governance, both of those are huge topics, right? You could make like multiple exams just on these topics. So I recommend that you download the skills outline. And every exam has this. So you can actually go and see what that actually means. So if you look at Manage Azure Identity and Governance, we have different parts in here, like objectives. So one is managing Azure Active Directory, and then you can see what does that mean. You need to understand how to create users and groups, manage user and group properties, manage device settings, and so on. And you can see we have that for basically all the points there. You can scroll down. Same thing for implementing and managing storage. You can see here what you need to be to do. So you need to understand what are shared access signatures and how do I use managed keys. So these are all the points which you need to understand so that you actually can start learning and preparing for this. So this is another big part, is like, this is probably the biggest you need to do, is understanding what is actually in the exam. The next thing I recommend is understanding the different question types, right? If you never took a Microsoft exam, you should probably, again, start easy, start small to understand what are different options there. Usually there are all multiple choice questions. In some cases, there are labs involved in the exam, so you need to actually click through and set up certain things or run certain commands. But you need to understand what's there. There are some certain practice tests, I will show you a little bit later, which you can get. I'm not speaking about dumps, I'm really speaking about like official practice tests where you can see how that actually works and how you take these question types. So the first time, this is probably very stressful when you take the first exam, but as soon as you've done it like multiple times, you will get more and more into the flow. But again, to not be surprised, just prepare and see what types, like how can the questions be. And then a good resource to prepare for these exams is Microsoft Learn. So Microsoft Learn is a free learning platform which is out there. You don't need any Azure subscription. You don't need any credit card. The only thing you need is a Microsoft account so you can log in. And then you can run through the different learning paths and different modules. And you can learn about different technologies completely unrelated to certifications. But we also have learning paths for the different certifications. So if I switch, for example, back to the exam website here of the, for example, the Azure Administrator one, if I scroll down here, underneath the skills measured, I also get ways to prepare. So you can see here I have online free paths, and you can see here there is a learning path for, or even multiple learning paths for the AC104 exam. So you can just go through, and then if I, for example, start one of these learning paths, it will take me to the Microsoft Learn page, and you can see what's in there. And you can see here, I can then start one of these modules. And these modules are text and videos to explain things. You have assessment questions you need to answer to see if you actually understood what you just read through or saw on video. But the great thing really is that you also get these free sandboxes. So I told you, you don't need an Azure subscription. This is completely free. When you go in and we have these examples to deploy, for example, a web app, it will open up a sandbox for you. And it gives you basically a temporary Azure subscription where you can deploy the services which are asked in that module, and you can actually try it out and play with it. Because to be honest, hands-on experience is always the best when it comes to these exams. So whenever you saw and actually did something, this is a great option to do. Now going back to my list here, as I already mentioned, hands-on experience really is great. So there's not just about like Microsoft Learn, but you can also create a free Azure account, and then you can try out different services. You get a couple of credits where you can play around, and some services are like free forever. So you can find out more on the page. And again, I put all the links here mentioned down below in the description. And you can see here I can create a free Azure account for 12 months with a couple of services, $200 of credits. And then there are services again which are always free. And so you get that hands-on experience for certain services. So this is absolutely great. I highly recommend you do that, because again, the easiest way to learn that stuff is not just read through it, but actually also go and play with these services and deploy them. Now, what I usually do, and this is really one of my preferred ways of learning, except just Microsoft Learn, but also when I, for example, know already a couple of the topics. So when I go through the skills measured, I know, like, let's say for one chapter about storage, I feel very confident that I probably know already 80%, but I see a couple of gaps where I don't like really know what to do. So in that sense, I just go and search for the Microsoft Docs article, which then explains this to me, and then I read through it. And there are also certain tutorials you can then click through, which is very helpful, because when you go through these, you learn so many different things about this specific technology that you can be very confident that you actually know what's going on. And I think this is really important to me. So what I do, and I will show that in, for example, my study guides, is I take the skills outline, really like all the things you just saw at the beginning, and then I go and find the different docs article for each of these topics, and then I can actually go read these and see if I understood these, and that really helps me. There are obviously a lot of great video courses and trainings out there from third-party provider, as well as some Microsoft first-party video content. So if you really like that, then I highly recommend you check the different ones out. There are a couple of them which I can again highly recommend. But whoever really, it comes down to personal preferences, which one you really like. Then we also have obviously our instructor-led courses and train and learning partners. So if you not just want to have a video where like you just watch it, but you actually want to have someone to have a conversation with, these are a great way to learn as well. I also see like that you have certain books on different topics, which can really help you. I mean, things are changing very often in Azure and obviously in cloud computing in general. However, looking at books, if you especially need the fundamental knowledge of a certain topic, the book can be very beneficial to you because it really guides you through the whole platform. So really recommend checking out these books as well if you prefer learning with a book. But again, be careful because some of the things are probably updated. And so a book from 2 years ago might be good for getting the fundamentals, but some parts are probably changing. So in addition to a book, then again, also check out Microsoft Learn and the docs to see what is happening there. There's also a way where you can download practice exams. So I mentioned that before. You can actually go out and buy practice exams. And again, I'm not speaking about the kind of like cheating brain dumps. I'm really speaking of official practice exams because that is really where you can then actually try out and see, can I actually pass it? But the same thing is with Microsoft Learn. If you go through Microsoft Learn, you have these assessment questions. So these are also very, very helpful. And what I also highly recommend is, like, especially in these times, sometimes it's really hard to stay focused and do things, and especially like there's so many things going on in the world all the time. It can be helpful to actually work together as a group. Like it can be a group of colleagues, friends, or join an Azure user group, and then just create these study groups where you say, okay, we want to let's set the goal. We all want to achieve like this sort of certification in the next month or 2 months. And then we can all study together and help each other out and challenge each other, and also block specific times to come together where we really focus on learning, even though we probably learn everyone for themselves, but making that specific dedicated time can be very important. Now, when it then comes to taking the actual exam, and again, I will do probably a whole other video about how the process works there, just relax, right? Be prepared for this. I mean, it's a stressful situation when you take exams. And so make sure you really take it easy. You block enough time. You when your exam is scheduled for 2 p.m. for example, make sure that you, for example, already ready at like 1:30, so you can get used to it. You don't have anything to rush because that you can really 100% focus on the exam, and also make sure that you have enough sleep. Obviously, all the good things there. And this really helps, and especially in this time, this can be very helpful, taking the exams online. Now, in the past, we always had to go to a test center, and we can still absolutely do that. Some people prefer going to a test center because there it's a different environment and you're really focused. You don't need to think about anything else than just sitting there and taking the exam. But sometimes your test center are far away, especially now in this situation. They're probably closed. You can't access them. Or you don't have enough time to actually drive there. So taking the exam from home is a very good experience. So you can take the exam online. Now, I have a whole blog on how you actually set this up, because obviously Microsoft wants to make sure that you don't cheat on the exam. So there are certain requirements for that. But you can actually book it as an online exam. And again, this can be also very helpful when taking the exam. I also want to remind you that there are sometimes special offers available, right? So in one company you can book these codes, or company can book discount codes for you. For example, let's say they can book 100 code, or 10 exam codes, and you get them for free. Get one for free or 2 for free or something like that. Or there's some special offers where if you fail the exam, you have a second shot for free. And so keep an eye on these special offers. Again, there's a lot of interesting things going on there. We also have very often, when there's a Microsoft event, we have something called the Cloud Skills Challenges, where we want to obviously get people skilled and use Microsoft Learn. And like sometimes the price, for example, is a discount code for a Microsoft certification exam or even a free Microsoft certification exam. So also keep an eye out on that, so you can take these exams. And then obviously what I recommend, just get started, right? Make sure you schedule your exam, because what happens if you start learning and didn't schedule, you will find reasons why you can't really learn, and then like you take a break for a week and suddenly you take a break for a month and suddenly the half a year is gone and you didn't really learn for this again. So I highly recommend that you actually go out and schedule the exam for in the future. Take a realistic timeline, but then this will keep you motivated to actually learn and go out to pass the exam. What I also recommend is that you check out my blog. Again, I put all the links in there, because what I created is I shared like my personal study guides I use to prepare and learn for an exam. I share that with the community. So I have a lot more than you can see here on the screen. But for example, let's say you want to get started with Azure Fundamentals. I have a study guide for this. And obviously it goes through and provides you with all the links for that specific exam, gives you some information, and then basically gives you also the Microsoft Learn modules, which are like related to this, for example, AC 900 exam. Give you some information how you can create a free Azure account to get some hands-on experience. And then you can find here the whole outline of the content within the Microsoft exam. And then what I did is I linked it to the specific Azure documentation page. So you can scroll through it and say, well, I'm very familiar with the shared responsibility model. I'm good with IaaS, I'm good with PaaS, but well, describe serverless computing. This is something I need to learn. So here's a link which goes out to serverless computing and explains it, and you can learn more about this. So this is very helpful. So you can see here, the whole exam is basically outlined. You find all this different information here. It also has third-party links in there. If I find like someone did a very good blog post on one of these topics or a video, I also add that to the study guide as well. And again, you find all of that within that blog. And there's a whole series. So if you go to my blog, to my website, and you use actually here the search button, just type in study guide, and you will find a ton of blog posts for different exams where you can go through. And I also try to regularly update the exams. So if there are changes to the exams where the new skills measured, I also do that as well. So I hope this gave you a really quick overview of how you can prepare for a Microsoft Azure certification exam. And if you liked that video, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the video, and hopefully see you in the next one. Thank you.